All right, guys, welcome to adjust this. There we go. All right, welcome to our new unit. We're going to start talking about today. It's going to revolve around the concept of like people who, with the American dream, things that started causing people to lose faith in it. Okay, particularly today, we're going to look at insecurities because we see a lot more of that popping up because you see when you realize that things are out of your control and the things happening in the world, when you see things like World War I, and you would see things like the Great Depression, and even towards the tail end of this World War II, you would start seeing that there was a lot of things happening around you that you just felt completely out of control. There was nothing you could do. No matter how hard you tried, these things would derail your plans, and they derailed plans for a lot of people. So we started seeing people develop. I wouldn't say there weren't these mental issues before, but they definitely start to show up more and more. And as psychology develops more, we start to see these things get names put to them. So I'm going to apologize to you right now. I'm sitting here looking at the screen and seeing how bright this is. There's an error, something going on with my phone, but hopefully by the next one I'll have figured it out and fixed it. But most of you probably don't notice, so it's no big deal. So we're going to look today at T.S. Eliot, who I believe definitely struggled with a lot of insecurities and probably even some depression. And we're going to look at a poem that's a famous one of his. It's one that's taught frequently. It's not his best, okay? For that, you would want to look at The Hollow Men or The Wasteland. So if you like this poem, check those out. The Hollow Men is a shorter poem. It's longer than this, but The Wasteland's a little more extensive. But they both share similar themes to this, okay? So they definitely show struggling with, opinions of yourself, with moral issues, things like that. So definitely an interesting thing. So if you'll turn to page 708 in your books, we're going to tackle the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Now, understand ahead of time, because if my students know how I teach, if by some chance that you unfortunately wander into this video and you have different opinions of this, that's great. A lot of this is so just vague, and the references and the ideas in this poem is so, it's stream of consciousness, it's all over the place, it's really hard to follow, so people are going to have different interpretations. I would love to hear what some of them are, but I'm going to tell you what I've gotten from it, my little bit of study. Now, I got a lot of this on my own. I did study it a little bit, but I haven't studied it much. Just kind of my own feeling for it, all right? So first of all, I wanted you to note the title, The Love Song. And we're going to see this is anything but a love song, all right? So that right away is ironic. In fact, I did read that Eliot debated changing the name, but I think it's important that he left it because the irony that's found in the actual poem versus the title, I think is really, really cool, okay? All right, so we begin with an epigraph that's in Italian, and no one needs to hear me attempt to read Italian, so we won't do that. But I will tell you what it means, and this is from, it's one of the many allusions in this poem, and this one is to an element in Dante's Inferno, okay? And the line that it's roughly translating here is, if I believed my answer would be given to someone who could ever return to the world, this flame would shake no more. But since no one has ever returned alive from this depth, if what I hear is true, then I will answer you without fear or disgrace. So what's happening is Dante's traveling through hell, and he comes across one of the damned souls, and he asks him about his story, and basically this is what he says. He says, since I know that you won't be able to pass this on, I'll tell you. Of course, ironically, Dante's not condemned to hell. He is just traveling through and is about to leave, so he will actually share the story. But this is meant to kind of, I think, identify that the speaker for this poem doesn't intend this to be for everyone. It's meant to be just his internal thoughts, and Eliot is sharing them with us. This is very stream of consciousness, so it's all over the place. If you were trying to follow your own train of thought, this is what it would look like. So you have to do a lot of thinking. Poetry is not always about there being a secret hidden meaning. Sometimes it's about the experience. Sometimes it's about puzzling through it. Sometimes it's just about recreating an emotion or a feeling, or as we're going to see in a later unit or in a later lesson, recreating an image. So we're in that period now where we're not so much about there's one defined message that you're trying to get to. This one, I believe, is really about giving you an idea about what an anxious person goes through, what anxiety is about this person who is just incapable of making a decision and following through with the question, and it really impacts their life. And I think that's really key, okay? So let's start on page 709. We've already kind of hit the epigraph. Let's look at the actual beginning of the poem. And I'm going to read it stanza by stanza, and the stanzas are irregular. So there's one that has only one line. Some have 12. I mean, they're all over the place, okay? So he says, let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels, and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent, to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask what is it. Let us go and make our visit. So this first, and I'm going to read the next part too. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo, because I don't really fool with that one. But the rest of this is really dealing with, those first few lines are really important, by the way. They're very famous. The idea about the let us go then you and I when the evening is spread out against the sky, that's a really pretty start. And then he says like a patient etherized upon a table, and that's scary sounding, like a patient who's been anesthetized, that's a hard word, but someone who's been given drugs and knocked out, that those don't go together. And he's going to have very stark and contrasting images in this throughout. Hey, I know this shouldn't do this when I'm videoing, but give me 2 seconds, let me check something. Okay, that fixed the lighting. I'm sorry, the pure, how light that was looking was throwing me off. I look like a ghost. I didn't want to deal with that. Okay, back to this. So, and then he has this very unromantic imagery of traveling to like the seedy side of town. You got one-night cheap hotels, restaurants with sawdust and oyster shells. And of course, you think about places like Logan's or whatever. They would throw peanut shells on the ground, and that's like a gimmick. But in this time period, that sawdust and stuff is there to clean up spills. It could be spilled drinks, it could be blood from a fight, it could be vomit. That was what it was there for. These aren't nice places they're going. Using words like tedious and insidious, these all indicate like you're taking this person to not the nicest part of town, perhaps. So it's really not where you would take someone on a date. You also get this continuous reference to a question this person wants to ask. Now, my personal opinion, I've seen various ones, but when he says you and I do get this instance that maybe he's talking to this person that he's interested in, okay? Now, we're going to see this change throughout time. Right now, we're getting it as youth, but we're going to see youth, middle age, and then old throughout. So I've heard a lot of people say he's referencing the reader. That makes sense. I personally believe that this person he wants to ask the question to is who the you is. So anyway, the next part is one of my favorites. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes. Licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. Okay, that whole stanza, a little more traditional poetry there. The imagery, the rhyme scheme, the rhythm fits a little better. He's describing smoke. But this isn't like my chimney smoke or something like that. It's yellow smoke, which is kind of a pollution type of smoke, again, which fits with this like unromantic imagery. But I love how Eliot's able to take ugly things and give them pretty descriptions. All right, he is a brilliant poet, no doubt. I mean, you may read this and be completely baffled, but it's really a amazing work, in all honesty. All right. He says, indeed, there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be a time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands, the lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time for yet 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of toast and tea. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Okay. Now, this one is our first. There's two phrases that I think he echoes very heavily. One here and then one in the tail end of the poem. This one's there will be time. He constantly references there will be time for this. There will be time. There will be time. This is the folly of youth. Okay, when you're a young person thinking, I have time to fix this. I have time, I have time to get my spiritual life in order. I have time to start making better grades. I have time to build better habits. And the irony of this is that you don't. You don't have near as much time as you think you do. First of all, no one knows how much time they have. But the second is, even if you live to be 80 years, this part of your life fades quickly. And building these bad habits, and he even mentions indecisions, the lack of being able to act. And he's going to reference Hamlet later. When we get to that, I'm going to talk about what that means. But the fact is that indecision is a decision, and that's one of the things. This guy refusing to act is a way of acting. Okay, so the there is time, he repeats it over and over and over. Again, one of the things to take from that is that there's really not. Okay. He says, and indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair. With a bald spot in the middle of my hair, they will say how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin, my necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there's time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. Okay, so here we have the moving from the youth to, middle age, let's say, because he talks about the bald spot. He talks about he's dressing a lot more conservatively, and all of that. He's getting, losing some of his muscle, things like that. And then the "Do I dare disturb the universe?" That's a cool one. That's this idea that so often we think that the questions we have for people are so life altering that we just don't want to pester them. I referenced that I'm this way with friends. I always think that if I as an adult, when I make friends with one of Mitzi's coworkers' husbands, or even some of my coworkers here, their husbands, or even some of my coworkers like Mr. Morgan, or like Miss Fuller's husband, Ashley. When we hang out, we have a lot of fun. I'm real hesitant to just like text people or say, "Hey, what's going on? Do you want to get together?" Because I always feel like I'm bothering people and pestering them, and that's why I have very few deep friendships. Because again, I feel like I'm disturbing the universe, and obviously we're not. Now this guy has all sorts of self-esteem issues, so he's going to get to the point of where he doesn't even matter. I don't have that particular concern, but the thought about disturbing the universe is kind of funny. It's a mistaken idea that our little questions and things are really that impactful. He says, "For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, and afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room. So how should I presume?" Now, I love the measuring out your life in coffee spoons line. There's a song from the 90s, I remember, that had that in it. It was the Crash Test Dummies, goofy band, but kind of a good song. But in fact, it references this play throughout that song. It's neat. One of these days I may let you guys listen to it. None of you will like it, and you'll make fun of me. But you know what? So be it. But the idea of measuring your life out with coffee spoons are small. And when I read this, what I take from it is he's measured his life in small, minor nothings. There's nothing major that's happened. Maybe because of his indecisions. Maybe because he hasn't acted. Remember, this is anxiety in a poem. What a guy who never feels like they can act. They're always overthinking things, all right? He says, "And I should have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. And when I'm formulated, sprawling on a pen, when I'm pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out the butt ends of my days and ways, and how should I presume?" This image here is of the image of like being a butterfly pinned in a butterfly collection, where you pin it to the wall, and he's like, "I'm just wriggling there, being observed." T.S. Eliot loves writing about eyes. They're very common. The Hollow Men reference eyes a lot. And I don't remember The Wasteland fully, but I would bet it does too. But he talks about how would I spit out the butt ends of my days and ways. In other words, the term butt ends makes it seem like, again, somewhat pointless. So he's imagining being pinned and being observed and having nothing really to say. "And I have known the arms already, known them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight drowned with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table or wrap about a shawl, and should I then presume, and how should I begin?" Now again, this is the key. There's references to she or her several times, but this is the one where we really get the image that there's something involving a girl, in my opinion. I feel like he's definitely interested in this girl, and maybe has been for a while, but still just can't seem to let her know. He can't tell her this, all right? That would go back to the "Do I dare disturb the universe?" Maybe he's worried if he asks her, if she'd go on a date with him or something, she's going to reject him, and that's somehow going to ruin the world, which obviously it's not. Like I said in class, if on a Friday night you ask a girl out and she tells you no, you're in the same place you were before you asked her out, dateless on a Friday night. Nothing happened. She might say yes, okay? We're really hung up on embarrassment, and we see that here. And it prevents us from acting. So when we go back to our concept of the American dream, the idea that we have all these opportunities, if you don't ever take them, what's the use in having them? And that's kind of one of the things that this poem really makes me think about that helps fit our theme, okay? All right, I'm digressing. He says, "Shall I say I've gone at dusk through the narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows?" Kind of my thought there is he's like, if I did talk to her, what would I do? Tell her about, and then he goes back to the beginning of it. The places I've been, the dirty, seedy side of town. I mean, that she doesn't want to hear about that. Of course, she probably would, but he never gives her the chance. He says, "I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas." This is a change for me, the tone here. This is where he starts really just dumping on himself. He's like, I should have been a crab that was born in the bottom of the ocean. I've got nothing to offer. He says, "In the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired of my malingers, stretched on the floor here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head grow slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here's no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid." That's the most honest part of the poem where he points out, he's been too scared. He points out, I don't see my head brought in on a platter. That's a reference to John the Baptist. It's one of the many allusions in here. But he's like, but I'm not a prophet. I'm no one important. He even says the eternal footman has laughed at me. That's death. He's like, even death has laughed at me and, not taken me serious. So, this guy's self-esteem is like zero. He has none. All right. Says, and it wouldn't have been worth it after all. And that is your second repetition phrase, though. Would it have been worth it? And what I gather from this is that point where the guy initially was like, there is time, and now he's realized he's justifying not acting. He's like, yeah, but would it have been worth it if I had? And this is something we do. We justify our lack of choice or our inaction by saying, well, if I had, would it really have made a difference, or would it have mattered? And he repeats it a lot in this stanza. And would it have been worth it after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talks of you and me? Would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say I am Lazarus come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all, if one setting a pillow by her head should say that is not what I meant at all, that is not it at all. So, the ending there seems to be like hedging his bets, like if he had asked this girl out, and she had rejected him, he would have been, oh, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean that. Now, I don't know if that's what he intends there, but that's how I'm taking it, okay? It fits with the person who's in this situation. Guys, I have, with my English degree, I have a psychology degree, and man, I'm seeing so many like telltale signs here of a person who's just, their anxiousness has locked them into a life of inactivity. And this is terrible. It's terrifying for this person, all right? But we get our repetition here. He says, and would it have been worth it after all? Would it have been worthwhile after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts, the trail along the floor, and this and so much more? Is it possible to say what I meant as if a malign lantern through the nerves and patterns on a screen? Would it have been worthwhile if one settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl and turning toward the window should say, that is not it at all. That is not what I meant at all. I feel like that goes with the last one, pretty much the same thing. Now we get to my favorite part of the poem. Of course, first of all, it's because he talks about Hamlet. Hamlet's a love of mine. He says, no, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was I meant to be. I'm an attendant lord, one that will do to swell a progress. Start a scene or two. Advise the prince, no doubt. An easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious, and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse, at times indeed almost ridiculous, almost at times the fool. And he points out, I'm no Hamlet, I'm no star, I'm a bit player who serves maybe here and there some points to make a scene work. He actually describes himself as, and you guys haven't read Hamlet with me yet, but he describes himself as Polonius when he references the fool here. All of this is Polonius's character, in my opinion. But Polonius isn't referred to as a fool in the play, but it kind of overlaps. Fools do show up in many of Shakespeare's plays, and usually they're the intelligent people. But I feel he's saying that in his life, he doesn't really serve as a hero, and even in his own world. He doesn't have heroic qualities. He's better suited as a bit player, even in his own life, which is so sad and shows such a low self-esteem. All right, so now we go from the middle age to the definite old age. He says, I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. Now, I'm stopping with one line left, but I want to point out that those are one line in this stanza. But those are famous lines, and I don't know why, except they sound funny. The do I dare eat a peach I've seen that referenced plenty of times. He's talking about getting old, and if you have, your teeth are weak, or even if you have dentures, eating a peach is a bad idea. So that's he's just talking about getting old. But then from the last line in that till the end, this is some of the prettiest lines in literature to me. And to be honest with you, I don't know why I like them so much. And that's one of the things that lets me know the talent that T.S. Eliot has. He's like Emerson, where you would read some of Emerson's writing and have no clue what he meant, but it sounded so pretty. And that's what I feel here. He says, I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. And look at this line that's all by itself. I do not think they will sing to me. What a lonely thought. It's so fitting that line is by itself. I do not think they will sing to me. Sub in mermaids, put in sirens maybe, and think about the way this would change. I don't know why. Eliot knew what he was doing, so he picked mermaids on purpose. But I could imagine, even the sirens don't want me. But he mentions mermaids, so I don't want to add too much to it. But again, he points out that even these, imaginary things don't want me. He says, I have seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed in seaweed red and brown till human voices wake us and we drown. Now those last 3 lines I really think are pretty. The image of these voices waking us and then you dying. It's such a dark ending. And I pointed this out in class. Those first 2 lines have a definite rhythm. It says, "We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till humans' voices wake us, bump, 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 and we drown." There's 3 syllables missing. In music, when you're listening to music, you don't always notice the correct notes, but you definitely notice the wrong ones. Even if you're not a music person, you can tell when that's not the right note. Rhythm is the same way in a poem. Sometimes we take it for granted and we just don't, but when there's lines missing or there's syllables missing, it feels awkward and it draws attention to those last 3 words, "and we drown." Okay, again, there's this emphasis there on, a horrible ending. Okay, I don't mean horrible ending as T.S. Eliot did a bad job. I mean for this character, for this speaker, the idea of, of death at the end. All right, so again, we're not going to find a big, deep meaning out of this poem. You can play with a lot of things, and a lot of poetry is about what you personally pull out of it. Me, when I first read this when I was your age, and I was kind of left on my own devices and told, read this and then write what you think it means. I mean, it's a train wreck. But when you really start, unplugging it and looking at the allusions and looking at the individual lines and seeing how it applies today, there's a lot of interesting things there. I mean, you can say something as simple as, inaction is still action. Hamlet, that reference to Hamlet is not unintentional. Hamlet's a play about inaction and how at the end of the play, a lot of people are dead because of that. So, we do get this image that we have to take control of our lives. And even though they may, be small and minute and not important, they're still ours, and we need to be in charge of them, okay? That message isn't directly in here. Sorry, school's out. The message isn't directly in here, but it's definitely one that you can take from it. Remember, it's not always about what the author intended as much as you can take from it, okay? All right, so we're going to end there. The next video I make is going to be on Images Poems, and y'all want to read some just what is this about? That's going to be probably the moment of, Mr. Morris, you really are kidding, more than anything else. If you thought this was ridiculous, wait till we see some Ezra Pound, some William Carlos Williams, some of that stuff that is just almost nonsensical, but I promise you there's a message to it. And it also fits with our theme here. So Images Poetry coming up in our next video. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful. I apologize for the length. This is a lot. This is a pretty, and I even left a lot of this unsaid. There was a lot I did not get to. So I hope this was helpful. If you try to read this on your own without being in class, I know this was a lot for you. So hopefully you watch the video. Hopefully it helps. If not, you know what to do. Email me, and I will definitely get right back with you, okay? All right, well, thank you, guys. I hope you have a pleasant evening.